We'll begin in three. One, two, three. Welcome to the Gnostic Warrior. How you doing today, Alex?
Great, Mel. This is exciting.
Yeah, definitely. It's a long time coming, even though we just ran across each other's paths in your forum. I've been a big fan of your podcast, and then you've just came across my work now, and we have a lot of similarities and also differences, and I think those are going to come out in this podcast. But before we get into your great work, your podcast, your books that you're doing now, your ideas, can you share with the audience a little bit about who you are and your background?
Sure. And I am all about the podcasting, man, I got to tell you. And I think I definitely ran across you because I'm a huge fan and have been for a number of years of Miguel at Aeon Byte, of course. And we've been friends for a long time, and we've both been doing the podcasting thing for a long time. For me, I guess it's 12 years or more. And before that, I was really a business guy, and that was my thing. And I have an MBA, and I went back to school to get a PhD in artificial intelligence at the University of Arizona. And I was in the process of doing that. And then I started an AI company and was able to be successful enough with that I can live out here in San Diego, where you and I both enjoy a lot. And but, you know, I always in the back of my mind was like, hey, you know, really, I want to answer the big picture questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And all this other stuff is just, you know, stuff that I have to do in the interim to get the space in my life that I can do that. So I've always been about the Skeptico podcast, and my approach to podcasting since I started it from a very kind of back in the day, if you will, was, hey, it was just the means to talk to people that I wanted to talk to. I mean, I didn't really care so much about about the audience per se, you know. It was about me getting a chance to talk to these people, answer questions for myself, for how this can help me lead a better life. And so there's an immediate connection right off the bat with you and the work that you're doing and in listening to your show. And I love that. I love that. You're trying to get someplace, you know what I mean? You're not just trying to entertain me with your show, which is great. You got to entertain me a little bit or I won't listen. But it's about you, you know, on this journey. And man, that's just fantastic. I just think that's what it's all about.
Definitely. And what I see with this, and if you look about it, Alex, you know, with Miguel, myself, a lot of the guests that you've had on, you mentioned in an email that, you know, a lot of the same guests I've had on. I mean, not near exactly. You delved in, of course, to the near-death experience in forever, for years, and have had hundreds of guests. And you always pretty much bring it up, you know. So there's that similar thing where we're on our each individual paths, but we're magnetized as well by other ideas. And that's what I find fascinating. You're very open. You started this road, as you say often on your podcast. You started, you know, looking at this as the science from the skeptical type of point of view. You wanted answers, and then you got pulled into this other arena of conspiracy, esotericism, the occult, religion, and here you are, right? Here you're talking to all these different people. And my path was actually the opposite. It was on the esoteric, the Gnostic, the occult side. I grew up completely different from you in my path, but we're kind of converging, I feel. And this is a common theme that I'm finding on ideas, you know, and the more open I feel that we are, you know, and you seem to be very open, and that's why I enjoy your podcast. Of course, we're not all going to agree with all these ideas and how we look at the world and so forth, but I think it's important that we stay open and our ideas or our points of view can change. So tell us about that journey a little bit, your journey from scientism, being skeptical, wanting to prove certain things like the NDEs, to coming into the occult realm, and of course with us hooking up and you talking to Miguel and so forth.
So for me, you know, because I was kind of a mainstream guy, not a conspiracy guy, and kind of a sciencey, techie guy, but I also had a long time interest in yoga. I mean, I've been a yogi forever, and I was just always attracted to that for some reason that I don't know. And not only the philosophy, but definitely the philosophy, but also the physical practice and pranayama, and just not that I'm particularly good at any of that stuff, but just attract it, and it's funny because I remember I was doing my startup in tech, and I'm in Dallas and I'm really going and blowing, doing everything I can. And I'm also doing correspondence classes with Yogananda, autobiography of a yogi. And now I live, I still do yoga like 6 times a week, and I ride my bike up, and I have this great spot that I perch myself on. It's this great area, and it's so cool that we live out here. And I look down right at Yogananda's Self-Realization Fellowship, and I just can't help but think, that's so strange. It's so strange, the path that we find ourselves on. But, back to your question, Mo. So that was, I wasn't really knowing where I was going, other than I felt like the quote unquote skeptics were full of shit. I didn't know for sure, but I just had a sense that they weren't really playing it straight. And I love, you're a business guy in the sense that you run a business, and especially in the business that you do. I mean, it's a tough business. I know it is. And I know that there's a lot of different sorts and types. And then you run into people who are skeptical, but also people who are in great need. So you run across all this kind of stuff where you have to have your bullshit meter on all the time, like for clients, but also for probably suppliers, but also for, it's the whole thing. Being in that world is, I think, so helpful, so useful, especially when you start talking to science types and science bullshitters, and Neil deGrasse Tysons and Sam Harris's, who are just full of shit, and Michael Shermer, who I love. Michael Shermer, he's a great friend of mine, but he's so full of shit. I mean, and being able to sort through that by really diving into the science. I mean, I cut my teeth with Rupert Sheldrake, Cambridge biologist. Rupert Sheldrake knows his stuff. Dean Radin, ions, knows his stuff. Bell Labs, research out the yazoo. Dr. Julie Beischel, medium reading, they know their stuff. I think that I'm so glad I started with that base, with the people who are doing an intelligent, educated, scientific pushback on the materialistic science bullshit. What you're alluding to is that led me to kind of the conspiratorial part of it. Not so much the esoteric occult side, because I was always kind of open to that, at least from the sense that Christianity seemed like a psyop, seemed like a social engineering project right from the beginning. So that also led me kind of into the conspiratorial thing. And the conspiratorial thing, as I've explored it over the last few years, I think has been really tremendous to me as well, because it's given me this other lens through which I kind of look at all this stuff. So, hey man, I mean, that's kind of, I love listening to the interview you did with Miguel, because I feel like I know a little bit about your background, and I'm like very interested in where this dialogue right now is going to go, because this could get really skeptical really quick in a good way. Because if I could just go on one more minute. One of the things I really enjoy is what I talk about getting to level 3, because level 1 is just like, Gnosticism, is there such a thing? Did people ever really study it? Or who were the guys who wrote these crazy comic book Christian kind of things? So and then number 2 is, what's the conspiracy behind that? Why is there this kind of crazy, this way, that way? And then third is, okay, what does it mean on that deeper level once you get past the this is what it is, This is the controversy behind it. Now let's get to that next level stuff. And so that's enough. I'm done.
Sure. Yeah. So to me, when you look deep enough, and as you have, and looking into the science, and as I'd mentioned, I went more of the esoteric route and then got into the science because I wanted to also validate what I was hearing in the occult and esoteric, because some of it seemed like just a bunch of gobbledygook and BS to me. And when I started getting into the science, I started resonating with the science, like it was part of me, even though I didn't have a scientific background. Me getting in, actually, my son into mold and learning about his sickness and various illnesses, I actually studied hundreds of papers on toxic mold and their effects. And I was having pushback by his doctors, who are, the leading authorities, and literally seeing specialist after specialist trying to save my son's life. That took me down the rabbit hole of science. And, I just started studying paper after paper and, reading that they're weaponizing the toxins found in mold. They're putting, in Iraq, Saddam Hussein actually he had a mold factory there of aspergillus, and they were weaponizing the mycotoxins. And they're basically a way to kill a population slowly over time, so they don't know they're being killed. So you could release these toxins over people. They would have no idea what is happening to them, but they slowly would start getting ill effects and dying. So I would read all this data, and then I would go to the doctor, and he would be like, mold's not dangerous, you're crazy, And so that took me, to listening to podcasts and coming across your podcast as well. And I found a massive conspiracy. And it seemed like there was a conspiracy to keep knowledge from us, right? And here I am, the Gnostic warrior, the knowledge warrior. And this is something I knew, but for some reason I had this belief in our system still, and doctors and science and so forth. And it took that trip down the rabbit hole, and then seeing it firsthand. And then my son, who was sick, could not get help, and they were giving him all these Latin names, and I'd have to look it up. What's this mean? I think he has this, so take him here. And I would read it, and then I would type in mold or the mycotoxins, and immediately I would find 10 papers tied to that condition, so I kept seeing that thing happen. And it was like as if they didn't have the knowledge. And then I would learn from other doctors that were knowledgeable that, they don't train them on mold. They literally have like a paragraph that doctors get trained upon mold. So it was almost as if they were trained to be stupid on mold, right? So I felt there was a conspiracy because you look at the data, millions of people, the fungal experts, the Rupert Sheldrake's, he's more of I'd say a evolutionary, not a biologist, right? What is Rupert Sheldrake?
Yeah, he's a straight up biologist from Cambridge.
Okay. And he's actually one of my favorite guys to study in regards to this. And, I've came across his work, a lot. So anyways, I found this conspiracy. And then if you look back, one of the things you focus on is the Roman conspiracy, Josephus. That really is the beginning of all this. This is the beginning of the attack on knowledge, because knowledge is power. And if you look at that time, that's when the Library of Alexandria was burned. That's when they took the temple, from the Hebrews, the Phoenician Hebrews, who we call the Jews today. Back then, they didn't even call them the Jews. So one of the things that you need to understand, and this is where I think we should go, is maybe here, the time of Josephus and the Roman conspiracy. When a nation conquers another nation, they don't kill everybody, and they usually allow certain people and lords and vassals to rule that population on behalf of Rome. And I believe that Josephus and a certain royal family, a Hasmonean family that happens to be tied to the Bible and to the alleged Jesus. And a lot of these names are allegorical, meant to actually conceal certain events. And so that's my theory, is that there was a war, and they decided at that time Rome was going to go to war against all knowledge. So there's this thing that I believe that certain people that are close to power have a job, i.e. Neil deGrasse Tyson, these scientists and so forth, to mislead people on behalf of the powers that be that rule, and through the deep state. And it's this constant thing for 2,000 years that we're in the year 2021 thereof talking about it right now.
There's so much to pull apart there. So, and I want to try and do that, because like one of the things you said that I think is super cool, and I've never heard anyone say it before, trained to be stupid. And I think that's spot on, and I think it's brilliant. And so I wanted to rewind back to that point because, your audience is probably already cool with this, but so many people aren't. And that's that they don't understand how the scientific conspiracy can work. They don't understand how your experience with your son could possibly be true, because where they immediately go is, this is what I hear. People go, oh yeah, like the grand conspiracies of that level are just impossible because you can't get everyone kind of on board, marching in the same step. And it's true, you can't. But what you can do is you can train them to be stupid. What you can do is reward people who follow people who are stupid, you can reward. People who are dissenters, you can punish them. Andrew Wakefield has kind of been back in the news the last couple of years with the whole vaccine science. I mean, if you go look at, I bring it up because I just ran across another interview with him. He was like the head of the whole vaccine department or neurological department. I don't know what it is, but he had like 20 doctors, researchers working for him at the University of London, which is like super prestigious. He was like a high-ranking guy when he dared to question the MMR thing, and he didn't even slam it. He just said, hey, it seems kind of curious here. There seems to be some kind of connection between this and these gastrointestinal problems that my patients are having and the autism and that kind of stuff. If you look at the takedown of that guy, it is a classic example of how this trained to be stupid thing that you're talking about, Mo, I think happens. That's how it happens. So number one, we take Andrew Wakefield, or I just did another interview with Dr. Eben Alexander, who is, Harvard neurosurgeon who happens to have a near-death experience and tells the world, hey, man, this is real. I was, my brain was gone, dead, spinal meningitis, gone. No, E. coli bacteria, spinal meningitis, gone. And yet I went to this other dimension, had this whole experience. The takedown by him of people saying, well, he doesn't know neuroscience. He's a frickin' Harvard neurosurgeon. He's got his people's brains. He teaches at Harvard Medical School. And yet they train us all. They train people in the field to be stupid, to accept that the crazy, wacky stuff that they want to make should be accepted and the other obvious stuff should be rejected. But I guess I'm going a long way around the barn because I think this point you're making is so important. The way it comes to us as we interface with the medical community, and I've done it only a tiny bit, not nearly as much. I can't imagine what it was like for you and your son to go through that for years, is this kind of wall, this white-coated wall of just willful ignorance that comes through with such confidence because they're taught also to be completely confident about their wacky, incomplete knowledge. So any other thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. So that's another thing that I totally agree with is there's a lot of egotism in the medical field and the scientific field, right? And if you look at how they're trained, and I use that train to be stupid, they basically are trained to regurgitate. There's really no active thinking going on. So the way you got to where you got, as far as being skeptical and then also validating the near-death experiences, because you looked into the science, you had time, because of the career path that you took, you were able to retire early and you were able to delve into the science and have time. Most people don't have time, and they're trained, I believe, to be automatons. And this science that I talk about often, and I believe is actually how we're trained and how the vaccine goes to work in our gastrointestinal tracts, is I believe that's how we're actually trained, is through our second brains to become almost like automatons. So if you look at our education system, it's not based about ideas and new ideas and innovating. It's about regurgitating. And there's nothing more, I'd say, more prevalent than in the scientific and the medical field than that. You step out of that line, you become Wakefielded, right?
Exactly.
So that's,
and it's complicated, and it's really complicated, and it's worth, it's worth spending this time to talk about it, because once you see it, then you see it over and over and over again. And you see it in, psychology, then you see it over here in medicine, then you see it in science, and you're like, Jesus Christ, this is how everybody is being kind of trained to kind of stay in line. And it's, some of it is just, I don't want to say it's innocent, but some of it is just the way that you run things to run things, like you have your business, but larger, you compete with larger companies. Haven't some of the bigger companies kind of gotten into mold and that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. All the biggest restoration companies do mold in San Diego County. Yeah.
And the way they run their business is the way everybody has to run their business, which is, just step in line. This is how we do it. Follow this procedure. And there's some guy who says, I was up last night and I kind of did some research, and kind of the way we're doing it, might not be the best practices. And this, hey, we don't need any of that. Just go out and do it the way that I told you to do it. Everybody does it that way. What are you complaining about? It's not is that conspiratorial, or is that just some guy trying to run his business, trying to keep from going under? It's hard to separate what part is conspiratorial on this is how we've become effective at getting things done, versus what you and I have a sense is true, that there is at some level, some mechanism that says, I have an interest in this, and I would kind of like to see this go this way. I would like to see people think that they are biological robots in a meaningless universe. I would like people to think that they're not spiritual beings with endless possibilities and connection to God. I'd like them to think, just go out and shop and Black Friday it, and that would be a better way for me to just run things.
Yeah, and I talked to the Russian philosopher recently, Alexander Dugin, and he made a reference to the serpents of capitalism, and how these people, they live individualistic, and they have a tendency to be more liberal in their views as far as political views as well. And, they do not follow tradition. They basically, it's all about them, so when I look at you mentioned I'm a businessman, there's a way to run your life, and you could take it to various extremes. And, when you operate a business, you have to kind of get individualistic, you get competitive and so forth. It brings out some things in you don't like, and maybe you have partners that handled that part of the business, which I'm assuming you did. But in any event, you don't have to sell your soul, to be a capitalist, but the game. And I'm sure if you never got out, you'd still be slaving away there in Texas possibly, and you didn't have a buyout, and you probably you would have had a good life, but maybe you wouldn't have went down the road to the serpents of wisdom, which I feel, you talked about you being in yoga. I feel it was always part of you. So there's this thing I feel we're forced to step in line with our culture. You make that comment, I went after the money. I totally get that, because I have to go after the money somewhat here to make it for my family, and I could take that to different levels if I wanted to. And I've tried to, and it wasn't me, and I was miserable. But in any event, there's this conspiracy, again, that goes from the beginning. It's to keep knowledge. I believe part of it is population control. And then I feel some of the powers that be, they're the rich class of the United States. They're the Hillary Clintons, the Jeff Bezos, the Bill Gates, and so forth. And if we see all those people, all of a sudden they're all on Epstein's Island. They're all connected to this kind of evil network. And I wanted to read a quote that I love out of your book, Why Evil Matters. And I know you didn't really want to focus on the book, and we're not, but it's really the premise of what we're talking about. And this is it. It's called Evil is a Lens, and it's part of chapter 1. This isn't a book about evil. It's a book about why evil matters. To get there, we have to look into the evil abyss. I understand the dangers. Focus too much of your attention on something, and you risk becoming a part of it. But there's a price to pay for looking away as well. Our culture is crowded with evil deniers who insist science is the answer, sizing the evil question down to small-scale talking point. At the same time, we're surrounded by do thou wilt, evil apologists who continue to pump and evil is cool message into music and visual arts. For a counterbalance to the strange alliance of scientific materialism and wink and nod occultism, you might look to our religious institutions. They have failed in this as well. We're preached at by narrow-minded religious believers who trade free thought for crazy authoritative dogma. Maybe there's another path, and maybe evil can be the lens that helps us find it. A shock therapy entry point to understanding those parts of human consciousness that extend beyond our minute-by-minute ordinary experience. A less than scary but true reality science lacks the wisdom, will to understand. Maybe we can nudge a little closer to the truth. Maybe we can look into the abyss without falling in it. But first, we'll have to confront Satan. We will do that in the next chapter. So that's interesting too. So let's briefly talk about Satan and my understanding. So you mentioned religion in there, you mentioned evil, you mentioned politics, you mentioned science, you mentioned where we're at now. And if you look at the story of Satan, which I want to bring up to you, Alex, is he was called the first Gnostic. Okay, so when I look at the story of the church, you look at how did the word Satan get to us? How did these stories get to us? Well, it got to us through Rome and the church, through Catholicism. And if you look at Satan, you look at what did the church fathers say about who Satan was? So that's the journey I went on. And I found out that was Simon Magus, and Simon Magus is, he was Simon the magician, and he's from Judea, the tribe of Judah, the same tribe that Josephus was from. And they called him Satan, the first Gnostic. He was the leader of what they called the Antichrist. And it was Simon who was held up as a god in Judea. They had statues of him, I think up until 400 AD, Alex, of Simon. They had a statue of him in Rome. They called him the bridge builder. And some of them called him the Son of Man. He had several titles, but one of the titles that he got surnamed was Peter, Saint Peter. So, the Catholic Church. That's the chair.
Right.
The Pope sits in.
Well, man, we could have a really good. And first of all, you are already, adding to my knowledge base on this. And when I first started looking at the whole Roman thing, I was completely ignorant. And I feel like I'm a little bit less ignorant, but I'm still filling in so many of the gaps. But I would also kind of, on the Satan thing, I would kind of pull it back to kind of the big picture stuff and maybe try and engage with you and see if we find common ground on that. Because, first of all, there's this co-created reality thing that we have to deal with. And that is, and I think you're totally on board with this, but we'll see. And that's that whatever Satan was back in the Roman day, it's different than what Satan is today. We are co-creating. Our collective consciousness seems to be co-creating our reality. So Satan today is everything that he is in all the movies, all the films, all the videos, TV shows, Netflix streaming, books that have been created since then and become part of our collective consciousness. And this is not like pure speculation. It seems, one, it seems to be confirmed by a lot of the wisdom traditions. I mean, if you talk to a Tibetan Buddhist, they say, oh, yeah, I mean, that's, it's Tulpa, but it's also this, who does the Gregoria kind of thing? It's not the Buddhist, but this concept of co-created reality is something that comes up a lot in a lot of different esoteric traditions. And then it even seems to be kind of supported in science in a way, in terms of what we put our attention on becomes reality. And it's one way of reading the whole double slit experiment, the observer effect, is it a wave, it's a particle? Well, it's, whatever your attention brings it to. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make any sound? The Zen people were thinking about this all along. So I'm throwing a lot of stuff there, but I'm not sure that we need to look at Satan per se. I mean, we can, but to me, what I look at and say, is there this extended consciousness realm? And for you and I, and most people listening to this show, that's like duh, how could you be so stupid? But it's important to remind ourselves that, again, back to the science thing, they're trying to tell you that the consciousness does not exist. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is like, consciousness is an illusion. Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, consciousness is an illusion. And it's not just those guys. It is fundamentally the foundational belief of neuroscience, is that there is no you in there, Mo. It's just this hunk of brain chemistry that's kind of doing this stuff. There's no you in there. There's no consciousness. So you go from consciousness, which is real and is denied by science, then you go to extended consciousness, and you have, all this other stuff. And in that realm, there seems to be a force that for as long as time has been around, we've identified as being just kind of nasty, kind of against us, kind of trying to damage our soul. So that's where I was going in the book, was to say, that's it. Don't get hung up on the history. But I love getting hung up on the history, so we'll go back there in a minute. But it's just like, can we at least agree on that? And then, so what I do all the time with people that I interview on the show when I want to kind of prod a little bit, I just go to the darkest dark stuff. I go to the interview I had with the FBI agent Bob Hammer, who infiltrated the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And, and he's undercover with these pedophiles who are luring at these little kids at Toys R Us and looking over the railing, and not just talking about the sex they want to do with those 7 and 8-year-olds, but how they want to hurt them and how they want to see the pain and the fear in their face. And I go, so still say there's no evil? And everybody at that point breaks down and goes, no, that's fucking evil. I don't know Satan, I don't know the rest of this shit, but that is fucking evil. And I think that's where we got to get to. That was my point, is, okay, so now you're with me. Now we can start talking about the history and all the rest of it, but let's acknowledge that there is this force out there that is in this extended realm, because these guys aren't just dreaming it up in their head. They are being influenced, and it is out there.
If we look at, we're a biological robot, right? And there's no extended consciousness. We have no spirits, and there's no spiritual realm and all this stuff. I mean, that's the perfect way to train a population to live in the now, right? To be an individual, to not care about another life or have a conscience, right? About what they do. If they lie or they bend the truth or they mislead millions of people for a little cash, hey, everybody else does it. Don't worry about it. And then if they do find out, i.e. possibly the Neil deGrasse Tysons, the Richard Dawkins, I think they're smart enough, right, to not get a free pass. These guys, I believe, are just paid stooges for the most part, and that's why they are where they're at. And, if you train a population to think that way, people are going to do that wilt, right? I was that way when I grew up under this system. I was like a foreigner growing up in a foreign country, but this is how we got down. And like, if I didn't step in line, Alex, I was just getting chewed alive by the fellow parasites around me. So if we look at that and we look at what's happened to us, individually in our individual past, it's as if they're trained to be this way. And then there lies the conspiracy. And then we take it to all those different levels. And that's how I believe population control happens. I believe that's how they pay off people. And then you live in this realm like we live in Disneyland, and behind each door are actually people that'll kill you and screw your children and do this and that. And when you first go into Disneyland, you don't think that, right? You think, hey, this is just the land of happiness and so forth. But you realize once you pull the cover, this isn't the Wizard of Oz. And there's people that are paid somehow through the deep state to do this sick stuff. And it amazes me that we've gotten to this level of depravity, though. The things that you see, the things that you read, it's just, why do we need to do all this? Why do they need to do this to so many children? And I think it's just gotten out of control, the do thou wilt type of thing. And that's who we have in power now in most places in our country. And a lot of the people that are running their businesses are like that, unfortunately. Not everybody, but they are.
Well, Mo, one thing I guess I pull it back now to the other thing, because the special time that we're in is a thing that I'm not sure. I have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I really push against it. I really rail against it because I think everyone thinks they're in a special time. And then when you really start looking at that timeline further, we get in, maybe we'll talk about the ET and the UFO thing. Now you're at hundreds of thousands or millions of years, and there's evidence for that, some really important evidence that you can't overlook. But even if we just take it back to the Roman thing, man, we are not in a special time regarding evil. There's been a lot of evil for a long time. We're not in a special time in terms of this abuse of children and this sacrifice of the innocent and the virgin and all that stuff. That is deeply, deeply ingrained, not just in the Christian culture either, but before Christianity. So I don't know. What do you make of that?
Well, I believe that I agree with you. I believe in the stuff you talk about. It's like on steroids. There's X a million people. We have the internet. We have our phones. So I think not a time in history you can compare to the past like we have now. So that's kind of where we're in a special time. And then guys like you and I could share this information and influence thousands of minds out there, not necessarily artificially, but we present evidence, we present truth, as opposed to, dictating to other people or trying to pull the wool over their eyes. So I believe this is the time that we're in a war of ideas. I mean, if you look at everything that we're talking about ideas on how to live, ideas on how to operate science, ideas on how to run our children. And what I see is there's going to be a division, and I believe it's actually forming right now in humanity, and this has happened, I believe, many times in the past. There's going to be a division between us and them, or them and us. And I'm not saying that, you're on my side or whatever. I don't know how that's going to play out, but that's how it's playing out, and I especially believe with COVID. So not in a time in history has the world been tracked, been able to been watched with video. They're going to roll out this COVID thing. Is you got COVID, the vaccine, you don't, or you got COVID or not. So they're literally, it's something metaphysically happening right now through our psyches, through our ideas, through our computers, through our phones that are dividing us. And that's what I believe we're coming into, is that time. And some people believe it's an authoritarian regime. And right when I heard COVID a year and a half ago, I go, babe, it's coming. I said literally in New Mexico, I go, babe, there was a CDC truck driving across us. They zoomed past us, and it was a black, and I was like, CDC truck? I never seen a Suburban like that. I go, babe, watch. In 4 or 5 years, they're going to have CDC trucks, and they're going to say mold on them, And then literally COVID comes, and I go, it's mold. Everything that they're talking about that COVID does is mold. And then you look back at leprosy. So if you look back at leprosy has literally been a disease where they segregated the lepers from the regular, the clean from the unclean. They did that, Alex, just up until recently. They actually still have islands where the lepers and their families are still at. This has happened before.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And it's hard to argue with it. We are living in warp speed in terms of the way this stuff is unfolding. And it is interesting, isn't it? If we can laugh about it a little bit and kind of black humor. But for people like us who have been in this for a while, to see this one unfold right before our eyes is kind of amazing, unprecedented. Pardon me, but, when you were in the middle of 9/11, you couldn't quite be sure, it was kind of like, this has just, it's just in like real time. But let me kind of take it in a couple different directions so we can kind of, because I like bringing it down to things that we can more put our hands on and measure and really get to kind of opinion. So like one thing I do is like take the Catholic Church, right? So the Catholic Church, we now know, has this long history of the institutionalized abuse of children. So from the highest level, from the pedo pope on down to all these corrupted cardinals and all these high-ranking people, many of which have gone to jail, have gone to trial. It is impossible, ridiculous, really absurd for anyone to look at that organization and think that that isn't at an institutional level. So the question for me then becomes, and this is how we get to kind of level 3, like most people just stop and they debate that, well, you can't really say that, and we don't really know, and innocent, bullshit. That's just frickin' a waste of time. What's a more interesting question to me is, how long has that been going on? And as soon as you begin to ponder that, you go, oh shit, that's been going on for a long time. That's been going on certainly since we were kids. And when we were kids, we just kind of heard the whispers of that, but it was never like the realness that it is now. But it didn't just start when we were kids. It was before that and before that and before that, and for hundreds and hundreds of years. So when you then put that back into what you were saying, which is undoubtedly true about the increased communication, and in some ways from a positive standpoint, the increased openness that we have in sharing information that wasn't shareable before, we have that side of it too, in terms of trying to figure out where we are in terms of this battle that might be coming between us and them. And then the one other thing I would throw into that is, then I think we also have to return to the spiritual and say, okay, from a spiritual perspective, what does that battle look like? And you have a perspective probably driven by your Gnostic sensibility, which is awesome in some ways, but in other ways, I'm not sure I'm totally willing to go there. So what do you think about that as the Catholic Church as a lens for looking at how this stuff maybe has been around for a lot longer than we think, but it is mainly by virtue of people like you and I and so many other people who are in this community of trying to expose this stuff, that it is more in our awareness?
I looked into the Catholic Church. I grew up Roman Catholic, and I don't go to the church for the reasons that you mentioned now. I don't support it in any way, but I want to read a quote from Pope Gregory the Great in the 7th century. "It's better to marry than to burn. It's better to marry than the occasion of death." All right. This quote, Pope Gregory the Great made in the 7th century, shortly after, under his authority, Rome had issued the decree depriving Catholic priests of their wives, decreeing they be celibate. Meaning priestly celibacy was now officially enforced by Roman law, which meant that it was illegal to have sex with anyone. Many of these same-sex priests were married or had serious relationships, mainly with women. It was said that sometime after this decree was ordered, Pope Gregory had commanded that some fish should be caught from the local fish ponds, but instead of finding fish, the fishermen reportedly found the heads of over 6,000 infants who had drowned in the ponds in order to conceal the priests' fornications and their adulteries. Upon learning the horrors of murders committed by the priests as a result of the unholy new law, Pope Gregory recalled his decree and purged the sin with its worthy fruits of repentance, extolling the apostolic command, "It's better to marry than to burn. It's better to marry than the occasion of death." The first great schism in AD 1054 between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church was due to a disagreement on priestly celibacy. And the RCC mandates of priestly celibacy have been widely protested by Orthodox Christians in the Eastern Mediterranean world for over 1,500 years. So if you look at the science behind celibacy, Alex, we'll find what's happened in the church. So it's been literally Roman emperors. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the quotes. Philo of Alexandria, writing in the 1st century AD, philosopher Philo of Alexandria had equated Sodom's sin with same-sex sexuality, and he believed caused man to be unmasculine, effeminate, and transgression of the gender hierarchy, and he called the greatest of all evils. Writing in the 1st century, I said that, Clement of Alexandria's treatment of marriage is a bond of a man and a woman based on free and rational choice, whose greatness lies in the opportunity to bear children, which assimilates man to God, the creator. He believed that the primary purpose of marriage is to produce children, by which, according to Plato, one secures for himself a kind of immortality. I can go on. There's probably
well, so where are you going with that? Because I see two different ways to go with that. I mean,
sure.
So
I'm going that celibacy creates psychopathy, eventually sexual psychopathy, whether they do it homosexually, which they're proving, or pedophile as well. And if you research that as well, anal sex, this is what I believe you need to understand about black magic. A lot of the black magic rituals deal with semen and anal sex, right? When you get semen in your anus, do you know how hard it is to get it out?
No.
It'll never get out. It literally becomes a part of you. So they have a magnetic chain into your anus forever. Huh. So that's how pedophiles work. It's how black magic works through people they don't understand. So if you have sodomite sex unknowingly with a black magician, or you have it with a pedophile priest or a pedophile teacher, if they know these secrets, they can control you, mind control you from afar. And especially if they've groomed you and they beat you down psychologically. So that's how they do it. And then I believe this is, they know some of these people that, hey, join the church, man.
So I'm with you on that last part. Okay. I'm not sure. So where do you come down on homosexuality in general? Because clearly that has been weaponized in a lot of different ways. But, there's been a lot of horrible, horrible things that have been done to people for what is essentially and fundamentally their choice in terms of what they do in private with another consenting adult. Do you see that differently?
I don't agree for my lifestyle, but like you, I think this is it's like, let them do what they want behind closed doors. They're not affecting me. They're not affecting my children. But when they take that to the next level and try to propagandize my children, try to say lies and put science out there into the media like they're doing now, and they're doing through the fashion.
Yeah, but everyone's trying to propagandize your children. I mean,
of course, yeah.
So I don't think we can pick on,
Oh, no, I got a problem with all of it. I got a problem with all of it. Yeah, but I don't want to go there. I am for more conservative, authoritarian type of stuff. And that doesn't mean I'm like, you can't talk, you can't have your podcast anymore. But I believe your ideas, they can't corrupt people, and they can't be based on false ideologies and fake science. But that's what we have in the world everywhere, right? That becomes us versus them. That's where it's getting to. It's either we allow this to keep happening, and just let them do whatever they want and whatever, or we put a line in the sand. It's like, okay, my theory is do what you want. I'm okay with that. This is part of your biological, whatever thing it is. I don't understand it. There's some science behind it, but that's your life course, your sexual choices. But when you take it to that next level, and then you're trying to propagandize, and I'm against all types of different things that are being taught to our children through the schools and through the media. And we don't have time to go through all that. But in any event, I have no problem with someone but when they're propagandizing my children, there's some serious issues there. So go ahead.
I just think it's a tough issue, and I think it's like so many of these, take the racial thing and the Black Lives Matter thing. And it's like, oh, man, that's completely been co-opted. Talk about propagandizing, talk about bullshit, of course. But fundamentally, it's fucking true, right? I mean, we still do live in a society that's incredibly racist. We still do have people walking around in the United States who have memories of slavery, like their parents were slaves, they're 100 years old and that they remember their parents being slaves and stuff like that. And you go look at that history and how we fought it, and how people, not only in the South, but a lot of people in the South, but also people in the North, fought it. And that is our legacy, and you go look at, other Native people, and the whole thing with the Canadian residential schools has blown up again now, and that's become real. So there's a lot of legitimate kind of stuff, and you look at what people who are gay and chose to be, for whatever reason, to express that sexual. Yeah.
Okay, so there's this thing about racism that I believe should be addressed. And again, this thing I believe actually is it's more metaphysical. It goes down to our tribal or ancestral roots that no one talks about. And again, I'm just talking about science. So a lot of what I'm talking about deals with parasite stress theory. It deals with what organisms we carry inside our bodies as opposed to a different tribe, i.e. an African American that maybe was in a different tribe, or an Asian, Chinese, or whatever. They're of a different, literally, organism with different parasites and different things. They grew up in a different land, right? We have this thing, and it's been proven by science, that we are attracted to people that have similar parasites and things, and then we're repelled. There's this thing that happens that I believe. So when we talk about, I've had Native American friends. I lived in New Mexico. I went on the range, onto the reservation, the range. That's in Texas, right? No, I went onto the reservation, and you want to talk about racist people. I mean, the family that I was with, they were very accepting of us, but as far as everybody else, and this is something I've experienced, I've almost been, I'd say, severely attacked on various reservations and by various races. Where I was more accepting, when I would go into the hood, whether it be an African American or a Mexican, when I lived in Anaheim, guess what would be happening to my white butt in that hood? That same guy coming down my we're not attacking him. So there's this thing that I believe happens within us, and you could say whatever, but it's part of our heritage, our racial, but also our biological. And then if you look at parasite stress theory, there's something within us that avoids other people of different organisms, and it's a metaphysical type of thing. So I'm not saying everybody's like that, and I believe a lot of us are a little bit, we're mixed as well. So again, I'm just kind of saying we gravitate more towards people who we are metaphysically and racially.
Yeah, I don't know the science on that, but I'm suspect of it, and also I think that this stuff comes up, and that there's these minor influences, but they're easily overcome just by, changing your belief system, right? So you can say because that, from a sociological standpoint, that's definitely true. Like, you get all these people in this little town in Michigan, and they hate black people, and then they're forced to integrate with them in one way or another. And, 5 years later, when the kids grow up, they're like, oh no, these people are totally cool. These are my best friends, kind of thing. So it's like, okay, you can talk about your biological predisposition, and then I can point to a sociological experiment that says, well, that trumps that 10 times over in
but
terms
they just
of
mixed DNA. They just mixed organisms. So the people you're talking about are
I'm not talking about them marrying and having kids. I'm just talking about growing, going to school with them.
Oh, sure. Like the culture evolving and our ideas about racial, interracial stuff, right?
Exactly. So
sure.
if you're going to measure that scientifically, you measure beliefs, right? So you go and measure the beliefs of these people before, and then you measure the beliefs of these people after, and they change dramatically. And then you have to account for that, and you can't account for that biologically, and that's not to say that so you would just have to tease out what you're saying, and I'd have to really kind of see that on another level, from a spiritual level. Of course, it doesn't make any sense from reincarnation standpoint. Go watch the latest Netflix show from my friend Leslie Kane on surviving death. And she has a great segment on there, and it's been done. It's the guy at University of Virginia, Jim Tucker, who's done all the reincarnation research. And they have this really cool little kid, and it's great because it comes from a kid, and she's like 5 years old, and she's talking about her mom, and then she kind of goes, no, my other mom, my mom with the pretty hair. And then they go track down her other mom, and her mom with the pretty hair is this African-American woman from not even that long ago, like 20 years ago in the Bronx, and that was her other mom. And they have all this data that kind of lines up. If you've ever seen that near-death experience or the reincarnation research, it can be incredibly compelling, the amount of data points that they line up. So on some level, it doesn't exactly ring true. It's not my thing. I can't sit here and do it, but I just think so I don't know if you want to jump in there with that, but the real point I was making is I just think we need to always be challenging the data and challenging the narrative and challenging our own narrative and everyone else's narrative too.
Definitely. And I agree with what you had said there. So do you know that there's people with my exact same Y DNA that are black? Do you know that there's same people that my exact Y DNA that are Arab, that are Jewish, that here I am in the West and I share their E haplogroup, and literally you'll go in Ethiopia and he's black? So if you research the data, and I research Ian Stevenson and so forth, is we reincarnate in the same DNA line. So my belief is that we reincarnate, and you could be of a different color or look of a different race, but we reincarnate in the same DNA lines, tribal lines. That's
interesting. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that research. I'll make a note. Please send me that.
Yeah, definitely. So then I did a deep dive into my own DNA, and that's how, I found out, my family came from pharaohs in Egypt, and then we were in Phoenicia, and we were in Greece, and so forth. And then I researched my haplogroup for the last 10 years, and I have people all over the world. Ethiopia is my main line in Ethiopia. And just so you know, Moses married an Ethiopian, Cushite, and that's how the Ethiopians came about. If you research kind of the history back there, again, I don't know if exactly that's what happened. And then I'm also, I'm interlined with the Greeks. So there's a lot of Greeks with my exact haplogroup. I think 40% of Greeks have my haplogroup, and then also Phoenician. So when I got my certificate, it said I'm Phoenician, I'm Greek, Hellene, and then I'm also Celtic, right? So I'm a Celt here in the West, but when I go back to the East, where my family originally came from before they came out here in a boat, I was of a different, possibly colored skin, and in Greece and so forth. So I don't know, my belief is that, we have a tendency to gravitate towards more of our compatible something within us metaphysically, the science. So again, I don't believe I believe it's just the way we congregate, and you see that here in the United States. You see that with, Chinatown. You see that with, my wife comes from Vista near here, and it's literally, she's Mexican, and her mother is white, but her father came from Mexico, and I go over there all the time, and she looks like she's Latina completely, but she doesn't jive the same with she's literally rejected in her community because she's not part of them. Even by her own father, somewhat, she was rejected her whole life. So there's something happening there that I've seen time and time again, and then with my own experiences metaphysically. And again, I'm open to anybody. My thing is if you're open to me, you have open ideas, you're a good person, you're someone I don't mind talking to and sharing ideas with and stuff. And I believe ideas and how we look at the world are huge, not depending on the race. And, people could be mind controlled no matter what the race is, So I believe, we've came a long way with race in these discussions, and we don't need to go back there. But the science is showing that we do connect with people with like organisms, and we're opposed to people that aren't. And people that are sick, we also don't want to be around.
So the very interesting discussion, and you do seem extremely broad-minded about this stuff, Mo, and I appreciate that. So I would just, though, if we're really going to dive into that, I just think we need to be methodical in teasing out all the different parts of it, because certainly we know that a large part of that kind of tribalism is socially reinforced and socially created, and you just get a group together and they're the in group, and, we just reject anyone on the out group, and it doesn't have anything to do with biology. On the other hand, in support of what you're saying, have you seen that German guy who is into the trees, and he published all this research that showed that trees are communicating in exactly the kind of way that you're talking about. And there's certain species of trees that don't like this other species of tree, and they kind of reject them. And there's others that like to be in groups and really don't like to be by themselves and stuff like that, which I think, on this level that you're talking about, this microbial kind of level, and these other, there's some basis for that too. So I think it's awesome that you fold that into the conversation, but it all has to be in there too. That might be a jumping off point, because I did want to make sure that we talked about Mitch Horowitz and the piece that you did on your website, and you pointed to me, and I really appreciated it, because it was about my interview with Mitch Horowitz. And I think that Mitch Horowitz is a really, really interesting point for us to chat about in terms of Gnosticism, in terms of Satanism, and in terms of particularly this guy, Michael Aquino, and just our ability to get to history, you know, and understand history. So take it away.
Sure. So, I mean, it gets back to what we're talking about. I mean, it all interrelates, and I believe you're going to get there eventually, where I'm kind of thinking with this, because it all deals with higher and lower consciousness, and that's what your podcast has been about. You know, so this consciousness, there's a higher consciousness, and then there's a lower consciousness that deals with the occult. So when you see the pentagram in the upright, that is the pentagram of the Gnostics, the blazing star of the Freemasons. And then when it's inverted, that's of Satan, the devil's hoof, of evil, of so forth. You do thou wilt, you follow the self. It's the individual path. So it's important, you know, that people, you know, they understand the difference. So, you know, a Satanist per se, they follow individualism, they follow the self. It's all about do thou wilt. And not everybody is involved in black magic, but there's a lot of magic involved in that. And, you know, I believe a lot of our culture actually deals with what we're talking about now. So anyways, Mitch Horowitz was on your podcast, and, you know, there was a lot said, and, you know, I love, you know, the way you put podcasts together. You're an inspiration to me. You definitely are very creative, but, you know, you started out the podcast basically. How did you start it out here? You said, I could trust you. Just don't go full retard on me. Don't ask me to believe that Michael Aquino is not the worst of worst Satanists, sex abusing, probably murder of children, probably pedophile kind of person. So my question is, you know, who was telling the truth, Mitch or Alex? You know, so I have a hard time when I'm talking to a Satanist, and I actually really don't even have them on my show anymore. And I've interviewed high priests in the Church of Satan. I've interviewed guys that were previous members, high members in the church. I've read a lot of their material over the years and so forth. And, you know, you'll find that lies are one of the biggest tools of Satanist and black magic, meaning they'll mix a lot of truths in with lies. And that's what I found when I was talking with these people, and what you seem to point out. And one of the things in groups is we need to understand whether it's, you know, they'll say the Freemasons, they protect their own, or it's the police, or it's the teachers union, or the prison guard union. There's this thing that organizations do to make themselves not get tarnished and so forth. And I believe one of the things, of course, is satanic panic. They always go to that, which, of course, Mitch Horowitz did when you brought up Michael Aquino. So Michael Aquino was a high-level army guy that used black magic.
Full stop.
Go ahead.
Talk about that for a minute, how you process that. High-level army guy. I mean, he was in deep with, they were like, hey, bring on all that Satanism shit if we can use it and weaponize it, right?
Right. And that really goes to what I had mentioned before, where people are put in different positions. So if you look at people that don't tell the truth, right, what I just said, it's a lie. It's black magic. Okay, so it's a form of Satanism. So when people do that, it could be Michael Aquino, it could be Neil deGrasse Tyson, it could be your boss, it could be your husband, it could be your wife. I believe we're actually trained in America to be somewhat Satanist de facto when we're young, because there's this thing in the Bible, all Cretans were liars. You know, I forget who had said that, but St. Paul basically repeated that. And, you know, there was this big debate, you know, I forget who had said it. Epaenetus Gnosis was his name, right? So Epaenetus was a prophet and a seer of the Orphic mysteries on the same island of Crete, where his fellow Cretans came from. And he said, all Cretans are liars. So there was this, you know, if all Cretans are liars, you're a liar, Epaenetus Gnosis, right? So, yeah, there's this thing that I believe we go along with it. It's Santa, right? And, you know, we know it's Christmas and whatever. And you're going to tell your kid, there's no Santa. You're not getting no presents. We're not going along with the cult. I mean, they're just like, we hate Dad. Oh, my God. He's a Satanist. You know, it's like, you got to go along with it, right? So that's kind of the reality that we live in. But when you get into the studies, and like you and I, Alex, and you pull up the cover and you start looking into things, you start going, wait a second, this is bullshit, and we're more aligned and magnetized to truth and finding it, and we're more repelled from the bullshit, i.e. skeptical, right? So when someone comes on your show, you don't have a problem calling them out, and I love that. And you probably have way more patience than I do, because the way you do it, I take notes. You call them frenemies, and you do this and you do that, and they still like you, and you still like them for some reason. But me, we become like that, But I think the reason, because of everything that I've been through, and my family, and what my kids are going through as a result of the lies and the satanic world that we live in, and the music. And I was a punk rocker. I lived in the world of Satanism, and all my friends are dead. Like literally 75% of them are dead from living this path of do thou wilt. And I almost died several times. Near-death experiences. I could be on your show talking about those, from 3 drug overdoses, coming back, waking up in prison out of a coma, and seeing them give me, pumping my chest and giving me charcoal and putting it in my mouth, So those type of things have happened. And I'm repelled by people that teach in the open these occult teachings and this magic, and they're on YouTube, and I end the article. There was another article that I actually made talking about this type of stuff, and they're openly teaching it us to our children. There's no type of age limits on them, and they're teaching them how to call demons and so forth. And if you look at the research, they're killing people, some of these people. So take it.
You just hit on so many great points, and I didn't really know some of the details there of your personal experience, which are very, very interesting. We could talk a lot about that, and how our path leads us to another part of the path, another part of the journey. But I wanted to hone in on a couple things, because it circles back to points we made. I love your point about deception. And I always bring this up to people because it is such a sleight of hand thing. You said about 3 or 4 points that were so key. One is that deception is part of the game for folks who align themselves with this certain branch of Satanism or occultism and stuff like that. And it's like, you don't deserve the truth. You know what? Fuck yes, I can lie to you, because part of the game is for you to figure out whether I'm fucking lying to you. And if I can get away with it, then I should, because I'm actually helping you, because you should be able to kind of figure it out. And I love how you tie that into our culture. That is our culture. That is, Bill Clinton. Well, it depends on what your definition of is. And just the bold-faced lies of, George Bush, of just conspiracy theory, it's like lies after lies after lies, just, and not to mention more current presidents, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, one after another. It is so interwoven in our culture. And that's the important thing, like we were talking about with Michael Aquino. If people don't know, you got to go look at this guy. I did a couple of shows on him. Worst of the worst kind of MK Ultra mind fucking people who just want to screw with people. His modus operandi, as it plays out with Satanism, is just what he was doing in the military, which is to go on and get you all upset and get you charged up and about Satanism, and saying all these horrible things and saying, hey man, this is my freedom of religion. Michael Aquino was made head chaplain in the army, of all the armed forces. This Satanist wrote the book, the guide for all chaplains in the army. Is there something going on there that just kind of an in-your-face kind of, this is kind of how we do things? But if people want to read your article and go listen to my show, the way I approached it with Mitch Horowitz, who, hey, like I said, nice enough guy, he's got good hair, he's got very well-spoken, excellent writer and all the rest of that, but a fucking liar. And you don't know if he's that willfully ignorant, which I find impossible to believe, or he's just lying. And that's my default position is, I just think he's lying. Because anyone who looks at the history of Michael Aquino, it is overwhelmingly evidential that this guy was a pedophile. And even when they investigated him with the Army, finally, they came out and they did this full report and said, I don't know why we can't nail this guy. I don't know why he keeps slipping through indictment after indictment. But the Army investigation says this guy is a liar. It's almost certain that the charges of pedophilia are true. It's almost certain that his charges of abuse and all this other thing, let alone they go to his house. So they have these little kids that come forward, 60 of them, and they describe what's in his house and the satanic altar and the bones and the walls all painted black and red and the things that him and his wife did. And it's enough information to get a search warrant. And they get the search warrant and they go in the house and they find everything exactly the way it is. And they get the videos and they get all this stuff. But of course, they can't make a court case because if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. This guy is being protected. But as you say, for a guy like Mitch Horowitz, who is high profile, you turn on History Channel, anything on esoteric, you're going to find Mitch Horowitz there spinning his very kind of soft, friendly, it's all okay kind of Satanism. For him to say, and that's where I did try and hold his feet to the fire, say, that's your inspiration. That's your inspiration, Michael Aquino? Really? And then, as you say, his default answer is, well, it's a satanic panic. Bullshit, satanic panic. The satanic panic's real? Sure, there were some wacky people that got all charged up about, seeing it in places that it didn't exist. But fundamentally, it was true. Satanic ritual abuse was true, like we talked about on that show. And I don't know if you've ever done a show on the McMartin preschool thing, but McMartin preschool, the first cases were freaking real. They took him to the UCLA hospital, and a little kid, 3 years old, who said he was getting raped by his teacher, they go find and they find evidence of it. And these kids have sexual transmitted diseases. They're 3, 4, 5 years old, and their parents don't have them. And they say it came from the teacher. That's physical evidence. But Mitch Horowitz will have you believe that it's all just satanic panic. And, Alex, I'm really surprised that you would say that. But back to your, so many points that you made there, I'm just trying to highlight them all. But the deception thing is so, so key. It just amazes me that people don't straight in factor that in, that the person's just lying. There's no other way to put it. They're lying in order to advance their agenda. And maybe I am, but I'm not, but maybe I am, but go check it out for yourself. But maybe assume that, everything isn't exactly what you see. I don't know. Did we talk enough about it? Is there anything to add to it?
No, it goes back to the root problem. People don't have the time usually to research it, so they accept the face value. That's my thing, where we're trained to be automatons and we're trained to accept these talking heads on the History Channel or on TV. So that's where the power lies, and where, of course, I have a problem. You said he's a liar, and I feel, you said maybe I'm a liar, but I'm telling the truth. No, I believe you're telling the truth because I know you are, because I've studied this subject. So it's different when you're looking at it a point of view where it's like, I never really studied it, but I like Alex. He seems to be, but I like Mitch too,
Yeah,
right? Where does that get anybody? Nowhere.
I can't. I got to jump in there because I love the people that come to the Skeptical Forum, and again, I've been doing this for a lot of years, so I'm always amazed when I go back and look at some posts. There's hundreds and hundreds of people that used to be there and aren't there anymore, and then there's new people that come, and that's always so fun and exciting. And I'm always there. If people want to find me, Skeptical Forum, I respond to almost everything there.
That's how I got here. Yeah, that's how I got you on the show. So.
I don't go to Facebook, I don't go to Twitter. I just try and live in my little bubble, but that's one of my little bubbles. But the point is, I just about lost it when I published that interview, and some people that have been around Skeptical for a long time go, exactly what you said. Well, Bitch seems like a nice guy, and he seems genuine. And I just want to go, you are so fucking being manipulated and bullshit. It is an act. It is fake. That's what the show was about, was if you just pierce through even the surface level of Michael Aquino is my inspiration. You get to the bullshit behind that. But you know what? If you're not there yet, if you're not comfortable pushing through that because you're just not comfortable where that will take you in terms of your belief, how you want to see the world, which relates to some of the other things you were saying, Mo. I want to see the world as protective. I don't want to see the world as divisive. I don't want to see the world as you went like this, good against evil. Well, there's two ways of looking at that. One is we create our world. So I don't want to see the world that way. I don't want to fall into the abyss. But I certainly don't want to go the other way and say, yeah, Mitch seems like a nice guy. And, he's well-spoken and he seems sincere. It's like, man.
So let's go there. So you don't want that. And I really don't want that, but I'm willing to get there to get to where you want to be, because we're already at what you're talking about. And it's happening in mass. So that's my issue is if I have the knowledge and the gnosis and I know what someone's saying, a high profile guy, and he's propagandizing thousands, if not millions of children, including my own, possibly in their rooms when they're watching YouTube, I got a problem. So that's where I'm willing to go like this with the ideas. Okay. So I would like the world where I just go outside and not worry about things, but there's people out there that are nefarious, that are lying, that I feel that, it's the kid getting beat up or the old lady. You either walk by, right, and you let it happen, or you step in. I've always been the guy that stepped in since I was a kid. And
I'm with you, Mo. I'm with you so much. But I feel like part of my spiritual journey is seeing another perspective on that too. Sure. So let me bounce this off you because I really want to know what you think. It's the God needs our help kind of thing, right? Because there is an element to that we both see the problem with. God needs our help has been used by every tyrant, every cult leader, every evildoer, to quote George Bush. And it's not true. God doesn't need our help. The other side of what we hear, like near-death experience and a lot of the wisdom traditions and even people on psychedelics, they go, everything is actually perfect. Everything is actually perfect. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't try and be more loving and be compassionate, but it really is perfect. What do you think about that? What do you think God needs our help?
I wouldn't say I like the be on fire for God and the Lord, and meaning that we're conduits for this, whatever you want to call God. So I believe there's two forces, and we've been talking about them. There's a heavenly higher force that could be God, could be a consciousness. It could be the good ideas. It could be philosophy. It could be wisdom, which I say the world is built upon. And then there's also the material realm that just decays and falls apart. And that's the lower consciousness. That's the materialism. That's the individualism. If you look at the history of ideas and the different political ideologies and so forth, I mean, it goes back to the time, of your ancestors in Greece, of Plato and so forth. And that eventually worked into religion, in my opinion. And so there's always been, I believe, a kind of war of ideas happening between philosophers, between people like ourselves. And, there's this thing that you have to, I believe, ride by your ideas and be willing sometimes to die by them, to have a world without pedophile priests. When I take my son to Catholic church, and he goes back to I don't got to worry about him, which I would never do because I would worry that there is that world out there. And it could get there simply, really, by fixing simple things and ideologies, i.e. priestly celibacy. There's a problem, I believe, there. We didn't get into the science, but you were wondering, hey, what went on? Well, I told you the celibacy started it. And if you go through and you start from the 7th century to now, you'll see what had happened. And I believe it's these ideas that need to be contested and they need to be fought against. And then there's the other where you could sit in a cave and meditate and life is great and do yoga and live on the beach. And I also believe you're in the fight, even though you're not. You're doing it more eloquently. So I believe that you are doing this, but in a more eloquent way where someone like me might get into some conflicts where someone like you probably will have more debates and live a nice life where I might die by the sword. So I'm not afraid.
The story, awesome. No, I love your, fucking totally love your energy. The story I repeat over and over on the show because it's just, I'm just trying to live through this stuff, and I'm so thankful for this conversation and it being a part of this whole Skeptico journey that I'm on, because it just is I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it to inform me, and it has just changed me so much. But the story I relate a lot of times is the hugging Saint Amma, Indian yoga kind of thing. And I went, and my friend Rick Archer at Buddha at the Gas Pump kind of introduced me. And even though Rick and I go head to head on so many things that we don't agree on, I went and visited Amma and I got a hug, and it didn't seem to do much for me on a metaphysical level. But here's the story. The devotees of Amma go to Amma and say, you're this elderly woman, but you work tirelessly, 18 hours a day. You do everything. You shovel the latrines with the untouchables in India, and then you sit there, and I witnessed it. She sits there and hugs people for 18 hours a day. And that doesn't sound like much, but these people are lining up, and their whole world revolves around getting a hug from this woman, and she's sitting in the kind of lotus position. They come in and lean forward. Do that I just couldn't. I wouldn't be able to do it. What she gives physically to this. And so one of her devotees go, Amma, I don't understand. You say, we are not of this world, and yet everything you do seems to be, all your energy goes into making the world a better place. And she says, world? What world? I love that so much, because I think that's the warrior. That's who I want to be, world. I want to do my little thing, but yeah, when we're done, I'm going to go ride my bike over to Yogananda's cliff, and I'm going to do yoga for a couple hours. I'm going to come back, have lunch. I'm going to be with my kids, be with my wife, just try and create, and I'm going to be okay with that. It's balancing the battle and the what world kind of sensibility to me. What do you think about all that, Mo?
I love it. And I believe that that's a beautiful path. And I sometimes I envy people like yourself that are on that path. And it's not mine. Like I feel that there's different characters in the game, and that my life path chose me to be the way I am. So my day would be somewhat similar, with the surfing, the hanging out with the family, and then maybe couple hours of martial arts, and then some sparring, and maybe a match, where I fight someone or whatever, and then have some lunch, have some dinner, hang out with my kids, read a little book, and then, call it a day. And that would be kind of my day, so. You
got more energy than I do, man. I'm envious.
Yeah, maybe do it. But the point was there, it's I believe we're similar, but I'm willing to take up the fight. And I believe that sometimes that we need to fight for what is right. And there needs to be guys that are willing to be frenemies with people. And then there's willing guys that, like me, I'd like to fight Mitch Horowitz in a YouTube fight. Can we do that? Can you arrange it? Maybe, either Skeptico, we could, or we could do martial arts, and, the Satanist versus the, Gnostic Christian.
Kind of funny story there, because Mitch got really pissed off after the interview. And he sent me some very, very sharp emails. And, I just did the same thing, the kind of marshmallow Patrick from SpongeBob, kind of thing, I was like, hey, Mitch, I think this conversation is important. I'm glad you're out there having your part of it. I go, why don't we go on some show? We'll go on Tinfoil Hat. We'll go on Miguel's show and Bite. I didn't offer up you, but we'd do it. Mm-hmm. Zip zero, which is the other thing you hear from these chicken shit Satanist left-hand pathers is, if you can get them out and get them to talk, that's great. But they really don't want to engage with anyone who's really going to call bullshit on them. They don't, because they know they just wind up looking stupid. Why wouldn't he go on any of these platforms? Miguel has a large platform. He's been on the show multiple times. Why wouldn't he go with me? I'm a nice guy. I'm not going to, I'm not going to do anything too mean to him, but he won't.
Well, it's what I said in the article, Manly P. Hall. The biggest weapon against a Satanist, a black magician, is the truth.
Yes. Yes. So true.
So, and that's the path we're on, brother.
Right on to that.
So let's finish this off with where are you heading now with Skeptico, with your life and where you've gone. You did this turn. I believe you're starting to bridge the gap between the material scientist and the spirituality and God. And I see you. It's almost like you're doing a full circle. You're coming back a little bit to tradition.
Well, I've always been, the beacon has always been the spiritual for me. It always has been. And if anything, I was kind of fronting a little bit in order to not hit people right between the eyes with that. But that's always what I cared about. I'll tell you what I'm interested in lately, and it has a lot of intersection with what you're talking about. And I wish I would have allowed us to go into the Josephus thing. And I you say Josephus, which I understand is, I don't even know if it's the right pronunciation, but I always say Josephus.
Sure either, so, yeah.
I'm not sure. So I just always go Josephus.
I like Josephus, actually. That's better, actually.
Well, I've heard it from scholars both ways, so I'm not like saying I know.
It's like Carl Jung and Carl Jung, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, I think that history is super important. I've just about driven listeners of the show crazy because I've done so many shows on it. But man, if you appreciate anything about what I do on Skeptico, it's that I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to drill into it. I'm going to get every angle on it. I just talked to, and I'm publishing it, I think next week, an interview with a guy, PhD, historian, Oxford, Adrian Goldsworthy, all about ancient history, Roman history. He's written books about Caesar and Roman warfare and Alexandria and very, very scholarly kind of thing. I love that stuff. Can't get enough of it. Love all the things that you were saying and Peter and stuff like that. And we should have that. We should have that follow-up discussion either on Skeptico or another round on your show, because that's where I'm heading. I think the unindoctrination thing is like key. And I got that term from Jeff Doherty, who is another friend of me. I love Jeff. I thought he was great. Jesus was an MK Ultra murder victim. Merry Christmas. I know that pisses off Christians, but it's like getting at the historical Jesus is, to me, is fundamental to understanding how we got to where we are. And as you said, how we get to the 7th century, how we get to this Roman church, which is really just the cult of Mithras kind of warmed over. It's really a secret society kind of thing. It doesn't really have anything to do with if there was a historical Jesus or what it taught. It really is about social engineering. That's my opinion. That's my working hypothesis. So that is just an area that I'm exploring over and over again and keep coming back to. So we should have that follow-on discussion. Yeah,
definitely. I agree. And again, it all ties in to now, to why we are where we're at.
Well, I hesitate to say I love agreeing with people when I agree with them, and I partially agree with you, but I'm also not willing to go there. I think it has been reworked over and over and over again every 20 years, just like our history is reworked. I think your quote from Pope Gregory, was it 7th century, is a freaking classic example of that. I don't know, but I would suspect there isn't any direct lineage between, him and Constantine. It's just like the playbook gets passed along. It's like you were saying about the Satanist playbook, why are Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, doing the same thing that they learned from George Bush when they were running drugs in, Mena, Arkansas. It's not bloodline shit. It's just you learn shit, and you go, oh, that's how we do it. That's how we say one thing and do another and get all this money and do all the rest of that. So I don't think there has to be this lineage because I think anyone who has that mindset of let me do what thou wilt, and let me amass power, wealth, control. The record's right there on how to do it. So the fact that the Christians and the Romans had laid it down in terms of how to do it, anyone can pick it up and copy it. I don't think there has to be we are living that now kind of thing. But that'd be a great topic to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And more of the living it now would be the results of those first campaigns and the magic put over the people and the population control methods. And as you had said, it's just the same thing, take it over and over time, right?
Yeah.
Controlling the masses.
Definitely.
So, all right, Alex, thank you for your time today. I hope you have a great day and with your family. And I think we're going to have many more conversations in the future. I could probably talk another hour and a half, but I think an hour and a half is good. So tell the audience where they can find your great work, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Mo. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll definitely do it again. And I'm just at skeptico.com. And I think if you just type in Skeptico Alex, even if you spell it incorrectly, you'll get me there.
And I highly recommend his podcast. Again, one of my favorite podcasts around. Every week he usually comes out with something. And Alex, I wish you actually would come out with more podcasts because I'm looking forward to them. There's not many quality podcasts out there. So thank you again for your time. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Mo.
You're welcome.